On September 29, 2023, a landmark animal welfare law came into effect in Madrid, Spain. This legislation marked a significant step forward in the protection of animals, introducing comprehensive measures aimed at promoting their well-being. The law's primary objective was to address long-standing concerns regarding the treatment of animals in various aspects of Spanish society. It sought to establish stricter regulations and ethical guidelines to prevent cruelty, neglect, and exploitation. One of the key provisions of the law was the prohibition of using animals in recreational activities that cause them pain and suffering. This provision aimed to target practices deemed inhumane and detrimental to animal welfare. However, the law did include notable exemptions, sparking controversy and debate. Bullfighting, deeply ingrained in Spanish tradition and considered cultural heritage, was exempted from the ban. Similarly, the use of hunting dogs, a practice deeply rooted in rural communities, remained permissible under the new legislation. The inclusion of these exemptions immediately ignited a firestorm of responses from both animal rights activists and proponents of the exempted activities. Animal welfare organizations argued that the exemptions contradicted the law's core principle of protecting animals from harm, regardless of cultural or economic justifications. They contended that bullfighting and hunting with dogs inherently inflicted suffering on animals and should be subject to the same ethical standards as other forms of animal exploitation. The legislation extended beyond these contentious areas to encompass a broader range of animal welfare issues. It imposed a ban on the sale of pets in stores and online, aiming to curb impulsive purchases and promote responsible pet ownership. Under the new regulations, only registered breeders could sell animals, ensuring greater scrutiny and accountability in breeding practices. The law also aimed to tackle the issue of animal abandonment, a persistent problem in Spain. It empowered law enforcement agencies to arrest individuals found guilty of abandoning their pets, sending a strong message that such actions would have serious consequences. The exclusion of hunting dogs from the law's protection sparked perhaps the most heated debate. Initially, the legislation had considered extending its safeguards to these animals, recognizing the demanding and often hazardous nature of their work. However, fierce opposition arose from hunting associations and rural communities who argued that such a measure would cripple their way of life. Hunters argued that their dogs were working animals, essential for traditional hunting practices and pest control in rural areas. They maintained that the relationship between hunters and their dogs was one of mutual respect and understanding, and that the law unfairly targeted a practice deeply woven into the fabric of rural Spain. This vocal opposition carried significant weight, particularly within the political sphere. The government, wary of alienating a substantial voter base in rural areas, ultimately conceded to the demands of hunting groups. The decision to remove hunting dogs from the law's protection was seen as a pragmatic but controversial move, exposing the challenges of balancing animal welfare concerns with deeply entrenched cultural practices and economic interests. Animal rights activists were vehemently opposed to this exemption. They argued that hunting dogs, despite being working animals, were still susceptible to abuse and neglect. The rigors of hunting often resulted in injuries to the dogs, and activists pointed to instances of abandonment and mistreatment once the hunting season ended. They asserted that the law's failure to protect hunting dogs sent a dangerous message that certain animals were expendable, undermining the progress made in recognizing the intrinsic value of all living beings. The controversy surrounding hunting dogs became emblematic of the broader debate surrounding animal welfare in Spain. It highlighted the complex interplay between tradition, economics, and ethics. While the new law represented a significant step forward in many respects, the exclusion of hunting dogs exposed the limitations of its reach and the ongoing struggle to secure comprehensive protection for all animals. Despite its landmark status, the animal welfare law faced challenges from the outset, particularly in terms of enforcement. While the legislation outlined a range of penalties for violations, including hefty fines and even imprisonment, concerns remained about the practicalities of implementation. The law relied heavily on the capacity and willingness of local authorities to enforce its provisions, a factor that varied significantly across different regions of Spain. One of the most significant hurdles was the lack of adequate resources allocated to animal welfare initiatives. Animal shelters, already grappling with overcrowding and limited funding, faced increased pressure with the influx of animals surrendered or confiscated due to the new regulations. The government's commitment to providing sufficient financial and logistical support to ensure the law's effectiveness was called into question by animal welfare organizations. Further complicating matters was the delay in implementing certain key provisions of the law. Mandatory pet insurance, a measure intended to promote responsible pet ownership and reduce abandonment rates, was put on hold due to a lack of administrative procedures and infrastructure. Similarly, the requirement for pet owners to undergo training and registration was also delayed, leaving a significant gap in efforts to promote responsible pet ownership and prevent future cases of neglect and abandonment. These delays were attributed in part to the political landscape in Spain following the inconclusive general election in July 2023. The formation of a new government and the subsequent allocation of ministerial portfolios and priorities impacted the timeline for implementing certain aspects of the animal welfare law. Animal welfare organizations expressed concern that these delays would hinder the law's overall effectiveness and urged the government to prioritize its full and timely implementation. The passage of Madrid's animal welfare law unfolded against a backdrop of evolving perspectives on animal rights and welfare across Europe. The European Union, while having implemented some notable animal welfare measures in recent decades, such as banning veal crates and reducing the confinement of egg-laying hens, faced increasing pressure from animal advocacy groups to adopt more comprehensive and stringent regulations. The debate in Spain over hunting dogs, bullfighting, and other contentious practices mirrored similar discussions taking place in other European countries grappling with their own traditions and economic interests. However, the EU's stance on animal welfare was not without its complexities. The ongoing issue of food inflation across the continent posed a significant challenge to advancing ambitious animal welfare agendas. Concerns about rising food prices and the potential impact on consumers and producers made it politically difficult to implement measures that might lead to increased production costs or reduced supply. The European Commission, tasked with balancing these competing interests, found itself caught between the demands of animal welfare advocates and the economic realities facing the bloc. Despite these challenges, the momentum for stronger animal welfare protections continued to grow across Europe. Public awareness of animal sentience and the ethical implications of human actions towards animals increased, fueled by campaigns from animal rights organizations and growing scientific evidence of animal cognition and emotional capacity. This shift in public sentiment created pressure on policymakers to prioritize animal welfare concerns and align legislation with evolving ethical standards. The future of animal welfare in Spain, and indeed across Europe, remained a subject of ongoing debate and evolution. While Madrid's new law represented a significant milestone in the fight for animal protection, its implementation challenges and exemptions highlighted the complexities of balancing competing interests and cultural traditions. The broader European context, marked by both progress and setbacks, underscored the ongoing struggle to secure comprehensive and enforceable animal welfare standards across the continent. As the debate continued, one thing remained certain: the fight for animal welfare was far from over, and its outcome would have profound implications